Welcome everybody to the Sunshine Coast Rally 2025. Like how wonderful to be here this weekend. There's people coming from all over the place. We've lost a few from the flooding in New South Wales, sadly, but just wanted to thank everybody for coming. And the committee has been working really hard with each other. Fantastic committee, I must admit. To try and make a beautiful weekend for you all, so that I hope you have a really beautiful time this weekend. We've got lots in store. We've got the trivia night tomorrow night, and we've got a workshop and spiritual concept meeting on Sunday, and amazing speakers, which is going to be beautiful. And I'd just like to introduce you all to Matthew M., who's come all the way over from Los Angeles to speak with us this weekend. So thank you. Yes, I had to reimburse Matthew for something, and I sent a message and everything, and I said, I'm so sorry, Michael, I did this wrong, and I got the message back, and he said, that's fine, but you have to call me Matthew, because I don't know who Michael is. And I guess that's what happens now with my 58-year-old mind. So yes, I'll just start with the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I know what you're all thinking. It's like, honey, who shrunk the banners? It's like, oh my goodness. This is what we received in the mail. Sorry about that. Yes. Anyway. So I'll read how it works, and then we can continue on with the meeting. Really, have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path? Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he was sought. Thank you. And I would like now to please ask our beautiful Rob S. to come up and share with us.
Good evening everyone, my name's Rob and I'm an alcoholic, member of the Cooling Group. Surprised to be here tonight. I was really looking forward to this weekend, and Wednesday night I got a phone call from Vic and he said, someone's pulled out, would you like to be a speaker at the meeting at the weekend? It just ruined my whole weekend instantly. And I was feeling really good, and I went to bed. My wife went to sleep straight away, and then I lay there with this guy talking in my head for 2 hours. Saying, what in the hell are you going to talk to about, at the rally? What have you got to offer? They'll find out you're a fake. And so I had that discussion with him, and then in the end I said, God, will you take care of this idiot? Because I really need some sleep. So I am grateful to be here, honestly. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I haven't really spoken at a rally or anything for a long time, and no reason, I just never get asked to. And it's probably because of my language, I don't know, who knows. So basically this is my story, and I did write notes. It's trimmed down. It was 8 pages, but now it's 1 page that I can't read with some highlighting on it. So, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. So this is my story, and it hasn't changed. That's a good thing about it. My dad got sober in 1957, and because of the nature of his disease, Mum didn't trust him that he was going to AA meetings, so he didn't have a licence. He'd lost his licence for life. He was 32 years old, and so he used to double me on his push bike. He'd be wearing a suit, like really smart. Dad had a red tie, and they all wore suits and polished shoes in those days. And I'd sit on the handle, on the bar along the thing, and go to this meeting and sit in this room and not know what was going on and go home. And that lasted about 6 months. Till Mum trusted him, and so AA has been a big part of my life. AA in Murwillumbah was a thriving fellowship, and lots of people came and lots of people went and lots of people stayed. So we grew up with all these AA families, and my mum never liked Al-Anon because they talked about people, and so she never went to it, but we had lots of gatherings of a weekend, and it was a beautiful thing, and I started to find out what life was about, and I just made a secret vow to myself, having heard all these horror stories and seeing, the plight of our family, that I would never drink, and I was never gonna. And one night I was 16, just going out with my friends to a dance, and one guy said they got Penfolds KO Invalid Port on special for 50 cents a bottle at the Australian Hotel. And everyone else was going, and I went along with them. And, my life changed from that moment. Well, not when I bought the bottle, but when I drank the contents of that bottle, my life changed. And the first thing I thought, once I could keep some of that crap down, was now I know why Dad drank this stuff, because I felt so good about myself. For the first time in 16 years, I felt warm, I felt comfortable, I felt self-assured, and I felt powerful. So the first thing I did, these guys I was with, there was 8 of them, we'd gone through school from kindergarten together, and 2 of them had particularly annoyed me since kindergarten. So the first thing I did was flatten one, and then the other guy tried to flatten me, and then we flattened each other, and that was the start of my drinking. The next morning, after I woke up, after I'd vomited all over my bedroom because mum had shut the windows because Dad was out at an AA meeting, and I'd vomited. I didn't know she shut windows at night, but anyway, I found out and I made a mess of my room, and Mum was crying and carrying on, and I just lay there, you know, fearing what Dad was going to say to me the next morning when he got home from his meeting, and he didn't say anything. He just knocked on the door and he said, "How are you feeling today, young fella?" And he went off to work. And I had all this guilt and shame and regret in me, you know, one night of drinking. And my whole world was changed. I went and met up with my mates and they were just bagging me and slagging me and calling me this. And my mate's still there, you know, with his blood nose and his hanky. And, you know, it was just disgusting. And I said, I'll never do that again. And I didn't. I never drank Penfolds KA invalid wine again. But 2 weeks later, I drank half a bottle of gin, and guess what? Same result. I just got home quicker, you know. I didn't last out very long. So that was my 14 years of drinking. You know, nothing eventful. You know, I had legendary status myself, but really I did nothing really eventful. When I was 17, I was playing A-grade rugby league. I was offered a contract. By the time I was 21, I was reserved for the reserve grade. I just deteriorated really quickly. And by the time I was 30, I was just about, you know, every time I climbed a set of stairs, I thought it was my last set. And, you know, I destroyed every relationship in that 14 years that I could, male, female, family. They just tolerated me. And I'd turn up and there was always trouble because I couldn't guarantee my actions after having had the first drink. And so 14 years later, you know, virtually the same scenario. I only had one fight. My brother-in-law, he'd been sober a year and I hated him. He was my best drinking mate. We used to put dimple scotch on our, you know, wheat bix. And I missed him. And the bastard got sober on me and made me look even worse. And I came home this night and I tried to kidnap my son and it was just terrible. And I, you know, anyway, that was my last drink on the 6th of March 1983. And my dad brought my family home 2 days later because I'd abandoned them. I took the car and left. And he brought them home and he arrived. By then I'd already made contact with AA. I didn't know how because I was crying on a Monday morning. You know, I was supposed to be at work. And this guy rang up and said, "My name's Dick, I'm an alcoholic. I understand you might have a problem, son, with alcohol." And Dad had rung him and all that stuff. You know, the magic was done on me. You know, I was sitting down the back praying when the phone rang. And, you know, old Chinese Ted in Brisbane used to say in AA, we have same-day service, same time, sometimes same minute. And it was like that. I was praying and all of a sudden there was help. My dad came the next night. He brought my family home, my wife and my son, and he brought his big book with him. And he sat down and he read me the spiritual experience out the back of it. He was sober about 24 years at the time. And read me the spiritual experience, and you know, I was just a sobbing wreck. And that's how I got to my first AA meeting. Yet, you know, 24 hours things can change. On the way to the meeting, Dick, who took me, told me his story, and I'm thinking, I can see why this guy goes to AA. But why am I going? And you know, I couldn't even remember 3 days later all the pain and disaster and calamity I could create with one night on the grog. And I went to that meeting and I listened, sitting on my hands, really scared. There was, I won't name this, but the guy chairing the meeting was called Antique Harry, and any of the old timers here would know he was like one of these guys. He'd say something and do that, and I was just dying with every smash of the table. And but I identified with everything there. I identified with one guy who talked about the problem with alcoholics is their inability to form true relationships with another human being. And I didn't even know what that meant, but that sounded like what I had. And he said he used to make people that he loved feel as low as what he did. And that was me too. If I was happy, you had to be happy. If I was down in the gutter, you're coming with me. You know, that's the nature of my disease. Self-centered, selfish. I just thought I was being, I don't know what I thought I was being, but I didn't know I was selfish and self-centered and self-seeking. I'm all those things. Still today I can be. So that's how I got to that meeting, and I identified, and there was celebrities there. There was, you know, Father Jerry and Sister Anne and Dr. Ross and, you know, all these characters. But the guy who really impressed me was not a house painter, an artist called Kevin. He was sober 2 years. And after the meeting, during his share, he said, you know, if you're in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's only two reasons why you'll be here. You're either an alcoholic or an idiot. Because only an idiot would come to an AA meeting if they weren't an alcoholic. And I thought, well, I'm not an idiot. But anyway, I went up to him after the meeting and I said, mate, if an idiot like you can stay sober, I can. You know, you can stay sober for 2 years, so can I. And we've still got a friendship today. I still ring him when I think my ego's running out of control. I'll ring him and he'll bring me back to the earth. So that was that. And you know, that was my first meeting and I thought I got out of that pretty good. And I was walking outside and then out of the shadows, this giant man stepped. And his name was Long John Silver. He was a giant. And he put his hand out and he said, son, shook my hand and he said, you can leave this meeting tonight and never have need to drink again. And I said, yeah, but how? And he said, if you don't pick up a drink one day at a time, no matter what, you can't get drunk. I thought he was a genius. I thought, I'll be back in the marital bed tonight when I get home. I'd been sleeping in the spare bed for 3 months and I got home and I woke my wife up, which wasn't good. And my then wife, I should say. And then I told her this story and she just looked at me and said, another one of your lame brain ideas. I just thought, oh no, anyway, I had lots of lame brain ideas. None of them worked. So, you know, I haven't had a drink since that night. And you know, whether that compulsion to drink was taken from me, I don't know. I haven't had a compulsion drink. A couple of times in my first year of sobriety, I thought it might be an easy way out because the pain got too much. And one night I was about 8 months sober and sitting home with my family watching Hey Hey It's Saturday, and I went into the fetal position and started sobbing. And my wife said to me, what do they say to do when this happens? And I said, ring someone. So she rang this lady called Grace, who was my temporary sponsor, who I avoided because she was like, you know, the bitch from you know where. And so, you know, she had to talk to me and she said, Rob, you need a sponsor, you need to do the steps. And, you know, within a week that was happening. And my life really changed then. It was fast-tracked. I joined a group called Emily. They had 120 members there on a Tuesday night for their speaker meeting. They usually had 200 people in attendance. You got to speak on your birthday. That's when you got to share. If you wanted to share, you went to other groups, other meetings. And it was a very powerful thing for me. Joe and Charlie came out. They were out here for about a month. They spent about a week, 10 days around our group. They did a retreat up in Toowoomba and took sponsors and their sponsees through the big book over 2 days. And I'd already been through the steps with my sponsor, but I did it again because I needed it. And so it was a very powerful experience in my life. You know, I love what they had to say. This was the original Joe and Charlie. Charlie used to smoke the pipe. No, was that Joe? No, Joe smoked the pipe, and he was the dark dude, the first black American to get sober in Little Rock. You know, had a powerful story. So that's been my experience in AA. And the vision, you know, the vision was always really powerful because I had no vision. I was talking to someone earlier, I had tunnel vision. All I could ever see was I seemed to find my way from one pub to the next. Everything else was blurry. I lived in a grey world. There was no colour. There was no joy. There was no fun. There was only this idiot and the stupid things I used to do. And, you know, dancing on the table might be funny, but it's not always hilarious when you haven't got your clothes on. So, you know, I don't recommend it. Not that I always did it, but it could happen. Because I never knew what could happen in my life. I had no control over what I did when I drank. So, in sobriety, it's been an amazing journey. So I went from that meeting, or that group with 200 members, I got transferred in the bank that I worked for to Charters Towers. They had 2 members. And I rang my sponsor up. I said, Neil, what'd they do this to me for? You know, what's happening? He said, well, God's got a purpose for you. When I left 2 years later, there was 2 groups and 15 members. So that's the power of this program, you know, because I had to start looking in at Rob. And then I got down to Toowoomba, and I'm not going to tell me how long have I got left. Yeah, I got time. Okay, going all right. Okay, so then I got to Toowoomba, which had lots of AA meetings, and I'd always wanted to go to Toowoomba, but in my job I had to do it in stages. So I had to plan God's vision for me. I always thought what God, I knew, I knew better than God, but, he needed help. So I ended up in Toowoomba, and it was another, 9 or 10 years of my life. That was very amazing. And the first meeting I walked into there, and I'd been running around, I'd been to about, I'll say 50 churches, but it was probably 10 or 6. But it seemed like a lot, because I'd always be sitting up the back and I'd say, no, they said that wrong, and this is not for me. I walked into this church on Saturday morning, I think it's St. Patrick's Church, Catholic Church in Toowoomba, and they were just reading out of the big book, and they were saying that, no, it was out of the big book, yeah. Deep down inside every man, woman and child, there's a basic understanding of a power greater than themselves. And it really struck me like, Bill talks about his whatever hit him and blew through him on the mountain. Well, that blew through me. Because I'd been looking outside of myself this whole time, and I'd been avoiding this place of contact within myself. So for the last, 38 years, that's what I've been working with. And sometimes better than other times. Sometimes I give the power back to other people in my life. Employers and ex-wives and stuff like that. But basically I have this conscious contact with this power in me, and every day for about 10 years I write a letter every morning. Dear God, Rob here. And then I just talk to God like I talk to my own father or my own children or whatever. And I write this simple letter explaining where I'm at and the issues I might be having with, fear and resentment. And then what happens then when I start saying that, I actually start getting honest with myself. And I really see in black and white what is the problem. And it's in me. And it's usually fear. Sometimes it's resentment, but if it's not fear or resentment, it's both. And there's nothing else that troubles me. That's a little part of my life. I had lots of other things written down here, but, they're not really that important. And this partnership with God is totally important to me. So I haven't had a drink in AA, and I haven't done a lot of things wrong, but I haven't been faultless. And I have to own this. I've been divorced twice in sobriety, but the good thing is I've been married 3 times. And I've still got one. And it's a beautiful thing, because, I did a lot of things wrong. Even in sobriety, the biggest problem I've had in sobriety, and I'll try and finish on this, is that I've not been good at making amends to those that I really love and I'm close to, because I have too much fear around it. And I never made amends to my first wife because I thought she knew I'd been unfaithful to her. But I thought she'd asked me how many times, and I didn't want to tell her. So what I did, I just worked really hard, 2 jobs, ended up with 2 houses, kids going to uni. All the things were right, but we were wrong. And the last night we were together, I came home from work one night, and she was sitting with her back to me. And I noticed that had been happening a lot lately. And she was reading the paper, and I'd say hello, and she wouldn't even turn around, she'd just mumble. And I went up to her and I said, what's the matter? I said something like, is there something wrong? And she said, yes. And I said, what is it? She said, you saying, is there something wrong all the time? And I said, well, let's talk about it. Well, 8 hours later, I was exhausted. Because we said all the things that we hadn't said for the last 24 years. But it came out in one heap. And I couldn't deal with my pile. And she went off to bed, and then I was left with Rob. And that was the end of her marriage. But, that was because I'd never made amends. But, after I went and asked a guy and did my 5th and 6th step with him and made amends to her, well, it was okay, but we never got back together. So, that's been my problem. And the same, I married again, a couple of years later, and the same things happened. And I didn't say the things I needed to say. Not that I'd done anything wrong, but I wasn't happy. And I wasn't going to say that I'm not happy. And the night after 13 years, my second wife said, I'm not happy in our relationship. And I was so good and sober in AA, I said to her, well, what are you going to do about it? I woke up the next morning and she was gone. That's what she did about it. And I hadn't seen her for 10 years until about 2 months ago, and I bumped into her in the street and made amends to her. I hadn't seen her. I hadn't been, she didn't want contact. Well, I didn't know. Her family said she didn't. But anyway, we had a 45-minute talk, and I was able to make amends, and she made amends to me, and we went our ways. So it's really such an important thing, that ninth step. And because it's after that ninth step that we do get the vision. It's not before it. Those promises are powerful, powerful things. And my sponsor showed me the promises at the same time I started doing the first step. He introduced me to prayer and meditation, the first step, and the promises. Because he said he knew what sort of selfish alcoholic I was. And that I would want to know what the reward was before I started even doing the work. And that was true. So that's the sort of child I am. So, my sobriety has been amazing. I'm on my third sponsor, the other two passed on. And they were the most amazing men in my life. Like my father, he died in 2011, 54 years sober. He helped thousands of people. We would wake up every Sunday morning in our place and there'd be people sleeping in the lounge room on the floor. He'd bring them home. He used to work taxis at night on Saturday night. He'd bring all the drunks home. Mum was, horrified. But, he helped a lot of people. And then people were just knocking our door any time of day. They knew Bob was from AA. He would introduce himself to people. My name's Bob, I'm an alcoholic. I'd go to Alcoholics Anonymous. We lived in a town of 10,000 people. Everyone knew if you needed help, go to Bob's place. And that's the sort of town it was. And I've never hidden, my sobriety and my relationship with Alcoholics Anonymous. I was just sharing with someone. I was at a staff committee meeting in Melbourne of the ANZ Bank on the 34th floor. The CEO of the bank was there. We used to go down every 6 months, and he came over to me and he said, "Oh, Rob, I see you're not drinking alcohol. Is there any reason for that?" And I said, "I'm an alcoholic." He said, "Oh, fair dinkum." He said, "Are you in AA?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Come and meet my chauffeur. He's been in there 25 years. And see, that's disclosing my alcoholism. That's hiding that is not anything to do with the anonymity principle. Matthew might be able to enlarge on that. But Dad always used to say, we're Alcoholics Anonymous, not Alcoholics Invisible. And it's very, very, very true in my life. I never hide it anywhere because I never know when someone might need it. I know I certainly needed it a lot of times. I wasn't going to say anything more, but I might finish on that. But I'll just finish on this little thing because I was going to bring Dad's big book out because it was such a powerful thing in my life. He lent it to me till I could buy my own. I had it for 8 months. And he kept saying, "When's my book coming back?" And I said, "Oh, well, I was waiting to see if it was $5 a copy in those days." And I thought I might be able to get out of it without buying one, like I might find a better way, but I didn't. And to read Dad's book, it's just a beautiful thing. But this is what I used to hear read out at a lot of meetings, and every time I read it at home by myself, I would sob. It just used to break me up. A vision for you. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realise we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. I mean, what an amazing thing these people left us. They were 4 years sober, a lot of those people, when they wrote this amazing stuff for us. It's such a gift that I don't think I couldn't write, a shopping list at 4 years sober. And they're writing this amazing philosophy that I've been able to live with all my sober life. So I'm really grateful to be here tonight. I'm really honoured that Vic asked me to share, and all I can say is I wish my sponsor was here tonight. Jimmy, everyone knows Jimmy. tea, and you know, he's just been a blessing to me. I met up with him at the 13th, at the 2013 Australian conference here, and I hadn't had a sponsor for a year, because my sponsor had died, and I thought, no, I'm not replacing him. But you know, after a year without a sponsor, you know, sobriety's not as good as you think it is. So that's just putting it out there. And like Jimmy says, yeah, if you're sponsoring yourself, one thing I can guarantee you is that your sponsor's an idiot. And that's what he told me. And so, you know, I just love that man, and I ring him every day. You know, and we talk about everything. You know, Irish jokes, our love life, the big book, how we work in our program, and we sing in a band together. 13 years ago, he invited me to sing in a band with him, and he's not singing at the moment, but we're waiting for him. So these are just some of my blessings, and you know, I've got a beautiful wife who loves me, and she comes to AA meetings, and she's not an alcoholic. And the thing I love, what she tells me, what she thinks, and I said, you know, what is the thing the most that you get out of coming to AA? And she says something like, I'm just really grateful that I don't have heads like you people do. Because we have the same problem, and my solution is way different to hers, I can assure you. But thanks for having me here tonight. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rob. Beautiful. Now I'd like to introduce you all to Matthew M. from Los Angeles. Can we put our hands together with a warm welcome?
Thanks, Jody. My name is Matthew. I have alcoholism. Wow, Rob, that was just beautiful. The way you articulated that and your spiritual awakening. And that was just beautiful. Thank you for that. I'm so grateful to be here. I want to thank Jody and Vic. And, you know, we went out last night and had dinner with Sam and Ray and Greg and a little Thai restaurant. And, I've been traveling by myself for about a week. And we were sitting there at the restaurant. We talked about everything. You know, we talked about our spirituality, we talked about our children and challenges and mental illness and everything. And I'm never not impressed with how intimate we can become so quickly because of this program. I think I met Jody and Vic for like 13 seconds in Sydney a couple of years ago. And we were talking to each other like we'd known each other our whole lives. And I gotta say, I've been alone for a week, having a nice time. I was doing fun things in your beautiful country. But I really floated home last night because of the connections that we made. And you know, besides being able to live comfortably in my own skin, what Alcoholics Anonymous has given me is a worldwide metric of people I'm intimately close with. There's 2 of them in the front row right here, 4 people I've known. You meet people and you feel like you're indelibly linked. And I'm so grateful to be here. My sobriety date is May 16th, 1993. So last Friday I turned 32 years sober. Yeah, applaud for God, you know. And I think I love Alcoholics Anonymous more than I ever have. And honestly, how many people are in their first year of sobriety? Raise your hand. Okay, a good amount of you people. So I don't want to scare you, but I think I also need Alcoholics Anonymous more than I ever have. And I'm 32 years sober. And part of that is because my life has gotten so big and so rich, which makes it more complicated, right? And these principles and these steps, I just keep mining them for spiritual growth, and amazing things happen. I can do things I never thought I could do. I can handle things I never thought I could handle, and I'm already getting philosophical, and I think I'll just tell my story. So, you know, if you're new here, I could tell you this long drunk-a-log. I had interesting things happen. I had really mundane things happen. I had a musical career as a rock and roll guitar player, and I drank myself out of a rock and roll band. I think that's impressive. That's hard to do, you know. It's really hard to do that. The bar is very low, but I crawled under it, you know. And but I really want to talk about May of 1993 because I don't want to talk about drinking that much. But I want you to know that I'm an alcoholic like you are. And, you know, in May of 1993, I lived in this apartment by the beach. And the ocean was where that wall is. And I never saw it. I could hear it, but I would have had to leave my apartment to see it. And I didn't like doing that. And I lost jobs. I lost the best job I ever had. I used to say I got kicked out of a rock and roll band. I got kicked out of 3 really good ones. and some really bad ones. And then I went and lost jobs that I thought were beneath me. And I had debt, and I had warrants out for my arrest. I'd alienated everybody I knew. I didn't have any friends left. And if you're one of the people that raised your hand, that's not why I'm qualified to come here and talk to you at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Those were my circumstances. And for years, I thought my circumstances were my problems. And I learned here that they're not. The reason I'm qualified to speak to you at this AA meeting is I'll give you what a day looked like, what alcoholism looked like for me. You know your sound system's possessed, right? Because I didn't go pah or anything. It just interjects. It's haunted. But I don't remember it very well, but I'll piece together what a day would have been like. I remember May 16th. I remember that day. But I would wake up if I went to sleep. I didn't sleep sometimes, you know. I lived in this big apartment by myself, but if I woke up in the morning, the first thing I would say, almost every day the last 5 months of my drinking was, don't drink today. And I would say it out loud, which might be a sign of alcoholism, because I was only me there, right? And I was talking to myself, and I would agree, like, yes, let's not drink today, you know, which is a weird thing, right off the bat. But I would say, don't drink today, and I would really believe, like, yeah, I'm not going to drink today. And it wasn't because I had a noble reason. All the noble reasons were gone. You know, I drank myself out of the best job I ever had, a job I practiced for all my life, a job I got endowed with some talent. I have some gifts and some skill, and that wasn't enough to stop. And my mother was dying of cancer a couple of miles from that apartment. And when she got diagnosed with cancer, I said, I'm going to be the best of her sons. I'm going to take such good care of her. And I didn't stop. But why I said in the morning when I woke up in May, don't drink today, it's because I was sick all the time. My body didn't work. I had the runs all the time. I had the dry heaves all the time. And it wasn't fun. I couldn't get a job. I was in debt. I was in trouble. I used to say I was in trouble with the police, and then I was in trouble with the people that scared me. And they weren't the police. And I just lived this small life. You know, I don't know if any of you, some of you are old enough to remember Steve Martin, you know, let's get small. You know, I got real small. I had a big life. I traveled all over the world. I made albums, you know. I have 2 degrees. I had lots of interests. And I was just living in this apartment, waking up in the morning, talking to myself out loud, saying, don't drink today. Because I was sick of being sick, you know. I didn't want to be physically ill. That was the reason I didn't want to drink. And I would believe me. I would believe me day after day when I said, don't drink today. I'd go, okay, I'm not drinking today. And I'd start walking down the hall. It was a big, beautiful apartment. I hadn't paid rent in a while. It's much easier to have a nice apartment when you don't pay rent. You know, the rent's kind of a drag. But I'm walking down the hall, and 2 doors down from my bedroom was, and again, nobody else lived there. There was a friend of mine who also was paying rent, but he lived in Mexico City for a year. And I went into the bathroom maybe that day, and I get in the shower, right? I get in the shower. I feel terrible about my life. I feel terrible about my physical state. I can't even think about my mother dying. I can't think about the jobs I've lost. I'm living in a very small space in my head. And I turned that water on in the shower, and the shower would hit me. And I don't know if any of you remember that, when the hot water would hit you, and you get 6% better. You remember, like, I was terrible. I'm worthless. And I go, hold on just a second. I feel kind of good right now. I'm not drinking, and I'm getting clean. And I'd shampoo my hair maybe. At that point, I was scraping the shampoo out of the soap dish, you know, because shampoo's expensive. And I'd wash my hair, and I'm not drinking, and I'm getting clean. And then I might have a thought like, go visit your mother. I love my mother. My mother was a really good person. We were talking last night about, you know, parents and mental illness and alcoholics and horrible things that happen to people. And I feel so guilty in AA. I was not raised by wolves. I was raised by golden retrievers. You know, like, my parents were really nice, you know, and I know we're not supposed to talk about how nice they were, but I really liked them. And I woke up, and I'm in the shower, and I'm going to go visit my mother because she's dying. Right down the street. And now I'm a good guy. I'm clean. And I'm not drinking. this is what these days were like. And I'd open up they had a sliding glass door on that shower, and I'd step out of the shower, and there's this thing, if you're new here, we call the bondage of self. It's one of the big weights and symptoms of alcoholism. And one of the symptoms that you're in the bondage of self, or that I'm in the bondage of self, is fear. I know I'm in the bondage of self even today when I'm in fear. Another symptom of it, which I won't talk about right now, is blame. When I'm blaming, I'm usually in the bondage of self. But I'm clean, I'm not drinking, I'm going to go visit my mom, so I'm a good person now. And I'd step out of the shower and I'd have fear. And it might sound like this. Wait a minute. What does mom know? And what does mom not know? Does she know that there's a pregnant teenage girl across town that has my child? Does she know that I can't get a job, that I got fired from the restaurant? Does she know that I owe the record companies money? Does she know that I haven't paid taxes? Does she know that I'm wanted by the police? And so now I'm afraid to go see her. But I really want to go. And I'm not drinking. So I walk up to the mirror, and I remember this very clearly. Towards the end of my drinking, I couldn't look at myself. So I look in my eyes if I shaved, which makes for a pretty rough shave, I'll tell you. I cut myself a lot. But I couldn't look at myself because I was really skinny. The day I got sober, a couple weeks after this day I'm telling you about, I weighed 108 pounds. And that's pounds, so you guys have to do the math. And but I'm 160 pounds right now. So I don't know how I did that. But while I'm shaving, I might think like, hey, you know what? I'll just go next door and get 2 beers because I'm not drinking. And that's not a joke to me. 2 beers is not drinking. Because I want to go see my mom, and my thought was, if I go have 2 beers, I can shuck and jive a little. Maybe, see what they know, my mom and dad, what they don't know, feel them out, see what's happening. And, that was my move I was going to do. And I'd go next door, I'd find the money for 2 beers, and I go next door, and I kind of appreciate that I'm in Australia because this is what would happen. I'd go to the liquor store, Mr. BJ's Liquor. Mr. BJ was a terror, that guy. But I'd go in there, and 2 beers now looks really small. They were so much bigger when I was shaving. But now they're like, wow. And then there's Foster's, and they're bigger. And I have enough money for 2 Foster's, and that's still 2 beers. And I get those beers, and I put them on the counter, and Mr. BJ used to look over his glasses. He'd go, Matthew, you got a problem, and your problem's trying to tell you that you don't have a problem. And I would say, are you the Riddler? Because I have a lot of problems. I don't even know what you're talking about. You wouldn't even believe all the problems I got. But while he's doing that to me, I'd see over his shoulder, there's a bottle of gin, and it costs just as much as these 2 Fosters. And I bought the gin. Every time. An hour ago, I'm not drinking. And I walk next door, I'd sit down on my couch, I'm going to go see my mom in a minute. I've taken a shower. I have relatively clean clothes on. I've been outside today. And I'd open that gin. I'm just going to have a little bit of gin. I'm so sorry. The sound system objects to this part of my story. And I drink this gin, and you guys know what happened. I get that feeling, And then I'm just going to drink a little more. And then I got to drink it real fast because I got to forget that I'm supposed to go see my mom. And we say in AA, alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's also really boring. It's like mind-numbingly dull. And I would sit on this couch in front of this TV that I never turned on because I was intellectually too good for TV, and drink gin. I got guitars on the walls. I didn't play. I got surfboards in the garage, and I lived next to the beach, and I didn't go outside. I got a huge library of books, and I didn't read. I just sat there and drank. And that's why I'm here. Because I didn't want to do that anymore. For a really long time, I didn't want to do that anymore. And I did it again, and again, and again. So that was May of 1993. And if you drank like that, let me tell you, there's an amazing life ahead of you if you're in these rooms. And what happened to me, you don't know what's going to happen. We talked about God today, and I'm going to talk about God today, and I know there's a lot of people in their first year, so I'm going to really, what I want to talk about today is grace. Because I think we can agree on grace. We don't have to have a bearded guy in the sky judging us to agree on grace. And I didn't recognize grace when it was about to happen to me. In fact, it looked like the worst thing in the world. What happened was May 9th of that year was Mother's Day. And my brother called me. I'm the youngest of four in an Irish Catholic family. And my middle brother was the terrible alcoholic in our family. I was not. I didn't drink really till I went off to college and then really got into it on the road with the band. But my brother was a terrible drunk. And at that time, he was 12 years sober. And he called me the night before Mother's Day, and he said, hey, tomorrow's Mother's Day. We're going to meet for brunch. Everybody flew in. The whole family's going to be here. And he said, it's probably Mom's last Mother's Day. He said, and I know you're having car trouble, which I still think is so funny, because we don't like to insult each other in Irish Catholic families. And my car trouble was I had a car key. I just hadn't seen the car in a really long time. We broke up somewhere and went our separate ways. And we called that car trouble in my family, right? And he said, I know you're having car trouble, and I want to make sure you're going to come. So I'll come get you. And now I'm mad. Because why would he think I'm not going to come? And now I'm offended, right? Well, it turned out I'd been calling my mom a lot, saying I'm going to come over. And I'm sure just like Rob, I meant it. I meant that I was going to go over there. But I never went over there. In fact, if you had asked me that day, when was the last time you visited your mom? I would have said, I don't know, like 3 weeks ago. It had been 7 months. And she lived 2 miles away. And I'm her youngest son. She changed my life. My mother was so kind. And my dad was this boisterous, Irish, funny guy. I could find my dad in a crowd from his laugh. My mother was the total opposite. Very reserved, very observant, and very kind. And she went to see me at school one day. Well, she didn't go to see me. She was the yard lady. I went to a small Catholic school, and she was the yard lady because she had to volunteer. And she watched me at lunchtime. I didn't know. And I was home before she got home because she had to go do some stuff. And I was listening to music in the living room. And she came in and she said, hey, take the headphones off. And she said, you're not picked first for the team, are you, honey? And I didn't know. I go, Mom, I don't care about sports. And she goes, no, but I was watching you. And your buddies, Casey and Smitty, they're all playing, and you weren't really doing that. She goes, do you want to play an instrument? And I about came out off the couch, man. I was so excited. I said, Mom, I want to play the guitar. And within 2 hours, I had a guitar in my hand. And we ate soup for like 2 weeks. And I thought maybe it was Lent or something. I didn't know why. It's because she spent her budget on my guitar. That's the woman. That's Mother's Day is tomorrow, and it's her last Mother's Day. So I hung up the phone, and I thought, okay, man, do your laundry, get some flowers, write a card. I have a degree in English literature, and I have a degree in religious studies, which makes me qualified for, writing a really great Mother's Day card. That's it, Nobody at an interview goes, so what do you know about Melville and Islam? Nobody's ever cared about my degree. But I wrote, I'm going to write this card, I'm going to get flowers, I'm going to get clean, physically clean and do my laundry. And I just sat down for a minute to drink some gin. And my brother honked his horn. And I've been wearing the same clothes for 4 days. And I go out there and I'll just hurry this up. I ruined Mother's Day. I didn't mean to do it. I never meant to do that stuff. And they didn't know how bad it was for me because I hid from them. They didn't know that I couldn't play with the band anymore. I lied to my parents and said I quit the band because Mom had cancer. And I went down there and ruined Mother's Day. I don't know what I did that day. I don't remember. And when I was 20 years sober, I asked my sister, who's kind of my best friend now that my parents are gone, and I said, what happened on Mother's Day? And she goes, no, we're never going to talk about that. And I said, well, why? And she said, because you were vile to our mother. Why would I be like that? I loved her. I respected her. I never felt angst or anger towards her, ever. She was the kindest person I ever met. And I ruined what was potentially her last Mother's Day. Fortunately, it was not. She lived for 6 more years. But I went home, and this is that grace I'm talking about, like the alchemy in AA, the things that you learn through looking at life through a spiritual lens instead of a material lens, which I hope to talk about tomorrow when I talk about the third step. But I was getting a ride home from my brother. I just ruined Mother's Day. We're screaming at each other. I don't know what about. We both can't remember what we were fighting about. It wasn't what just happened. A fight broke out in the car. Are there any other Irish people in here? Anybody raise your hand? Yeah, so, yeah, you kind of get that, right? Like, we would fight like swans on a lake, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, see you Sunday. Yeah, see you. Say hi to Mom. Like, there was no biggie. But we're screaming at each other. And I get out of the car, and he's 7 years older than me. I was a bit of a surprise from my family. And I got out of the car and slammed the door, and I didn't know Grace was coming. I just knew I hated him right then. And I thought, I'm not going to lose this argument. Not this time. I just ruined Mother's Day. And I thought I had the moral higher ground. I think that's alcoholism. My arrogance is immense. My self-esteem is tiny. And I went into my house and I paced around my apartment waiting for him to get home because I had to finish this fight and win. I didn't know I was setting the wheels of Grace in motion. I thought I was finally going to be done with this BS. And I called him and he answered the phone. And I just lit into him. I just gave him everything I had. It was hard being his little brother. Where I grew up, I had a paper route. That was like my first job. And in my paper route, I would deliver papers for 30 days, for a whole month. And then the paper made me go collect from all the people that got the paper. And then I paid them, the paperback, for their papers. And I kept what was left over, and it was $30. So I made $1 a day when I was 14. And almost every month, my brother would steal that money and go get drunk. And this guy, and I'm going to have it out with him. He's 12 years sober. I don't care. And I'm screaming at him. And he's not talking. And I'm screaming at him, and there's nothing coming from his side. And when I finally got done yelling at him, he said really quietly into the phone, Matthew, I think you have a problem with alcoholism. And this is where the first little bit of grace showed up. Out of my mouth, and I swear to God, I didn't know I was going to say this. I said, of course I do. I was just as surprised as he was that I said that. And I know now, and if you're in your first year, it's up there on the wall. I worked the first half of the first step by accident. I admit it. It's a surrender word. I copped to it. I let it out. I said, of course I do. And then he said something really funny. He goes, don't go anywhere. I go, okay. I was going to move to that end of the couch in the fall, but I never went anywhere. And he said, I'm going to come right over. And God bless my brother, he got to my house in like 10 minutes, and he lived a half an hour away in Lawndale. And he just raced to my house, and he came in the door, and he inhaled, and he went, let's go to the beach. I lived like a single man, like my house was a cat box, and I had no cats, right? It just stank in there. And he came in and looked at me and looked around. It was a lot of things that are hard to explain that I won't get into at this time. And he said, let's go to the beach. And I thought, honestly, while I was waiting for him, I thought he's going to come in here and punch me in the face. He's going to come in here and beat the hell out of me. Because I had some history with him to believe that was going to happen. But I also kind of wished somebody would do that. And he came in the door, he inhaled and said, let's go to the beach. I grabbed 2 packs of Marlboro Reds, I remember that. And we went down to the beach, and I'm shaking, trying to light this cigarette. And my brother's looking at me just patiently. I'm shaking. I'm so afraid about what's going to happen. And I haven't had a lot to drink. I ran out of gin in the middle of the night. And he takes the cigarette, and he takes another one, and he lights 2 cigarettes. And my brother did not smoke. And he smoked one, and I smoked one. He was just like, calm down. And then he did this amazing thing. And I always try to be real true about this because it's kind of what we're responsible for. My brother looked at me for a minute and he started talking to me about how he felt when my mom and dad kicked him out of our house. And I did not expect him to talk about that. And I was 11 years old when that happened. And I couldn't believe we kicked out somebody in our family. And I leaned in. And he's telling me how he felt. And then he'd look at me for a minute and go, what's your plan? And I think, God, he doesn't even know there's a pregnant. I'm 30 years old. There's a pregnant 18-year-old girl across town with my child. She's about to have this baby. I don't even know if he knows that. And then he starts telling me how he felt when his wife and son threw him out of their house. And I remember that. I was 16. I remember because he didn't have anyone to call. My brother was brilliant, very, very smart guy. Played the drums like nobody's business. Super handsome, looked like Paul McCartney. And when his wife threw him out, he had no one to call but his little brother. And he started telling me how he felt that day. And he asked me what my plan was. And I thought, God, he doesn't even know I pushed that girl down a flight of stairs last night. I'm an animal. I knew that my life was so foreign to what he thought it was, because I was the guy with 2 degrees. I was the successful musician. That I was working the second half of the first step, and I didn't even know it. I knew my life was so unmanageable that he wouldn't even believe me. And he started telling me how he felt when he lived in his car. And I didn't know it, but right then, I realized he was talking about how I felt, sitting on that lifeguard stand. He was describing exactly how I felt, and I didn't think anyone knew how I felt. I thought he was this wise Buddha all of a sudden. It turns out there's a chapter in our book called Working with Others. It says, tell them a little bit of your own story and win their confidence. And my brother had a lot of practice thumping me on the chest and calling me stupid. And I've heard that in AA. I've heard people go, let my sponsor thump me on the chest and call me stupid. If that's your sponsor, run away. That is not Alcoholics Anonymous. It says very clearly in there, we never talk down to another alcoholic. It doesn't say, except when they're wrong. We're wrong all the time, you know? And my brother just saw me as an alcoholic suffering from alcoholism, and he came armed with certain facts about himself, and he laid them out, and he won my confidence. I was like, I want to be him. He's sitting over there. He shows up for mom and dad. He's married, and he's faithful to his wife. He goes to work every day. He's got clear eyes, and the truth comes tumbling out of his mouth. I've been trying to do that for years. I've been trying not to drink for months. And here he was sitting there telling me he's just like me. And I'd love to tell you I surrendered and yada yada. I ran out of cigarettes. I smoked them so fast. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes. And I realized I got nothing left to put in me, and he's still talking. And I couldn't bear it. And I said, you know what? You're right, man. I'll go to AA. And he laughed, like this wise Buddha disappeared, and my kind of jerky brother came back. And he laughed, and I go, what? And he goes, you're not going to AA. I go, I'm not going to AA. And he goes, no, you're going to a hospital. And I go, no, I don't, what? And what? And he goes, I go, how long? And he goes, 30 days. And I'm like, dude, I'm busy. I really thought I was busy. I haven't left my couch except to go see the Riddler like for months. But I was afraid. And you know, it's so funny that I thought the hospital was extreme. Before I pushed the girl down a flight of stairs, the night before that, I put a gun in my mouth. But let's not rush into hospitalization. You know, I think I'm good. And he ignored that. And we walked up the stairs and from the beach. And I had the stairs. I lived on the 2nd floor. And I'm walking up to my apartment. And he goes, hey. And he said, don't die. And I thought he knew that I was putting a gun in my mouth a lot. Late at night when I was particularly self-pitying. And he didn't. He later told me, he goes, if you died before Mom, I was going to be so mad at you. So I kind of forgot about our little agreement. And on May 15th, the day before I got sober, he called and said, hey, we figured out a place we can take you. I got to take you by Moms and Dads. I got to sign some papers. It's covered by the insurance. I'm going to drive out to the desert. And he goes, tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, God, we're really going to do this. You know, I've been drinking for a week. And so I stayed up all night drinking, getting ready for rehab. And I remember, oh, shit, I'm going to rehab. I better present, you know, correctly. You know, I didn't want to be a false specimen. And so I drank a lot. I drank a lot that night. I drank so much that I fell over And you know how you don't know you fell over till the evidence the next day? My head was in this weird place in the corner of the living room, and my shoulders were up, and I had this, my back was really wet, and I don't know if you guys, there's this place called 7-Eleven in the States, and they sell big gulps, right? And I had fallen down on a big gulp. I don't know where it came from, because 7-Eleven was 3 miles away. I never went there, so the Martians left it or something. But I fell on it, and I was passed out, and I woke up because the phone was ringing, and I thought it was my brother. So I answered it. I never answered that phone. And I answered the phone, and it was this woman who said, "Hey, your daughter was born, and we've been trying to reach you all night." And honestly, I'd forgotten about that. I am so selfish. I am so self-centered that the big news of the day was I'm going to rehab. And they said, "Can you get to the hospital?" And I just woke up. I got a raging hangover. I don't know why my back is wet. And I go, "Yeah, I can come to the hospital." And I got my car key, and I took all my optimism out the door. I'm going to find this damn car, I got flip-flops on. I got these OR scrubs we used to wear to the beach. I got a torn T-shirt, and I run out into the sunlight, and I ran around my neighborhood like lizard brain, like I got to find my car. And I found my car. A miracle, right? Grace. I find my car. It's not booted. It's a beach town. It's got 1 million tickets on it. I threw them in the back seat with their cousins. I threw all the other tickets. And this is the best part of the story. And I drove directly to the wrong hospital. Because that's what I do, What I did was I drove to the hospital where I was born, right? Because that's where babies come from. Like, I'm so selfish and self-centered. I'm like, I know where babies come from. And I went to, they were never going to be there. And I yelled at this lady. I just yelled at this poor candy striper lady with blue hair. And she just had these glasses on. She was so afraid of me. And I'm screaming at her, like I'm saying their name over and over. And she said, "They're not here." And I walked outside, and I went to the Getty Museum in Malibu about 6 months ago. And at the Getty Museum, there's a vase. It's about this big. It's paper-thin glass. And it's been around since before Christ walked the earth. And I remember looking at that vase thinking, I don't know how this thing has survived, this fragile, beautiful thing. And I had this moment of clarity when I left that hospital. And moments of clarity are not always good things. They're not comfortable. And it was like I took that vase, this precious thing, my life, my gifts, my parents, the love, the character, the integrity, and I smashed it in this parking lot. And I'm looking at all this glistening asphalt and these little tiny pieces, and I know I can't fix that. I'm not going to put that back together. And I decided to go kill myself. And I decided to kill myself out of self-pity, self-loathing. It wasn't because I'm going to be a terrible father. It wasn't because I'm a terrible son. It's because I'm afraid and I'm a coward. And I got in my car, and I was sure, I knew where the gun was. I was sure I could do it this time. And I put my head in the steering wheel, and I'm sobbing from my guts because I hate myself so much. I can't even find this baby. And I turned the ignition on this car, and the whole car went, like it backfired and jerked, and my head bounced off the steering wheel, and the name of the right hospital came into my head. That's grace. That is by the definition of the word grace. Right? How many of you people in here meditate? Raise your hand if you meditate regularly. Okay. So when you start meditating, you find out, what's the first thing you find out? You're not in charge of the thoughts that come into your head, right? You're not, like I was with Darren and Jody in Sydney, and I was meditating before my talk, and this girl, Carla Rojo, came into my head, right? I was meditating, deep in meditation, and Carla Rojo wouldn't go to a dance with me in 8th grade. I'm 62 years old, right? And I'm on the meditation like, God, Carla Rojo. Like, I'm all like, that's how random these thoughts are, right? And I'm in my car trying to go kill myself, not wanting to go find this baby in the name of the right hospital. I had an involuntary electrical impulse go across my brain, and I drove to the right hospital. That's grace. That's this power we talk about that Rob talked about so well. Rob just described how it grew in him. He was in tears with the promises. And so I went to this hospital, and I ran up the stairs, And I ran down the hall just thinking, I gotta get there. And I ran into the room, and there's Anna. And the last time I saw Anna, I pushed her down the stairs. And I want to be really clear. I wasn't a violent man. I wasn't trying to hurt her. She was standing in the doorway of my apartment. I'd been drinking for 3 days, and she said, we need to go to the doctor later today. Maybe don't party. And I remember she had these little thin wrists, and I took her, and I just tried to get her out of the doorway, and I pushed her too hard. And you know that feeling when you know you pushed too hard? And then I pulled the door closed so I wouldn't have that responsibility. And that was a few weeks before this. I guess about a week. And I walked in there, and she looks up, and she's glad to see me. And I felt ashamed. And I was not in love with Anna. And she got out of the bed. Have you ever seen a woman that's just had a baby? This is not pretty, man. Hey, I was told I was supposed to tell the truth tonight. She looked terrible. Like, it's not a good look. She got out of bed. She has her hair matted to her face. She's got no neck all of a sudden. And she's coming. I'm just telling you, I was there. She's coming at me like the Elephant Man. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm thinking she's going to hug me, and I don't want her to hug me. And as she gets closer, there's just something radiant and beautiful about her. And I did not expect it. In all of this, she just had been in labor for hours, but she had this red hair and these freckles and these blue eyes, and she'd just become a mother. She had become more. And I felt awful. I felt so dirty looking at her. I felt so filthy looking at her. And then she didn't hug me. She was smiling at me, and she reached into this box, and she pulled out this beautiful, beautiful baby and handed me Phoebe Rose. And I looked at Phoebe, and I wanted to throw up. And I know now what I didn't know then. I know now that the reason I missed all of that is because I was in the bondage of self. And when I'm in the bondage of self, I got kind of two things I do. I've noticed this about myself. I paint everybody with my interior ugliness. If I'm going to walk across the room, I got to go, you're a liar, you're a thief, you did that, you stole. And these women, it did not stick on them. My sickness wouldn't stick on them. And the other thing I noticed about me when I'm in the bondage of self is I look through a little pinhole. And the pinhole says, that little vision, like, what does this mean about you? What does this say about you? I missed this most beautiful thing because I was in the bondage of self. And I stood up straight. I handed Phoebe back to Anna, and I said, everything is going to be all right. And I knew it was the truth because I was going home to shoot myself. And I knew it was going to be a breeze now. Because they lived where good people lived. I couldn't live there anymore. And I just wanted out. And I raced home in my car. I ran up the stairs to my apartment, and standing between me and the door was my brother. Grace. It's all around us. I believe we swim in it. I used to think it was like Amazon packages. It came and you go, I forgot what I ordered. Then you open it, you're like, oh, that's awesome. It's not like that at all. I'm in the bondage of self, so I can't see the grace. But when I'm not in the bondage of self, I can't not see the grace. But at the time, I just saw my brother standing between me and a gun that I wanted to see. And I said, hey, I got to go inside. And he goes, no, you don't. And I go, no, I got to go inside. He goes, no, you don't. And he goes, I packed your stuff. And I've always wondered, because I didn't have a lot of stuff. I was like, what's in the bag? And he goes, I packed your stuff. And my sponsor says the most spiritual sentence in Alcoholics Anonymous is get in the car. And my brother said, get in the car. And I got in the car. And this is what I came to talk to you about. That's what I was like. That's what happened to me. And then my brother took me to rehab. I was terrified when I walked in. I was terrified when I walked out, but I'd gained 47 pounds, so there was some improvement. I came out of that hospital. I don't remember much, what happened in there. I was a really sick person. I had an old-timer in our group named Rotten Ron. He used to say, you boys come in here at 90 miles an hour. You're going to skid for a while, And I think I, skidded right through rehab. I was like looking around, I remember we ate food and slept at night, two things I hadn't been doing. And I got out of rehab, and I got 30 days and nothing else, but I don't know that. I just think these are my best friends in my rehab. I haven't seen any of them since, And my brother drives me home, and we get out at my apartment, and he goes, hey man, go to a meeting. And I lied. I used to lie reflexively back then, but I lied so he would drive away. And I said, yeah, of course. He goes, no, tonight. I go, yeah, of course. And he drove away. I go, I'm not going to a meeting, right? I mean, I just got 30 days. My mom's sick. I got a new baby. I got an apartment to clean up. I got stuff to do. Mr. AA over there wants me to go to a meeting. And he drove off, and I ran up to my apartment, and I opened the door, which was not locked, which concerned me. And there was a big party going on in my apartment. And I lived there by myself. There were girls in bikinis snorting cocaine off my glass table. There was pot smoke in the air. I used to say somebody handed me a beer, but it wasn't a beer, it was a Coors. That's not a beer. And I'm looking around at this, and I had another one of those moments, another unexpected thing. And what happened was I had a thought. I'm looking at all my favorite Olympic events, right? But I don't know any of these people. And I had this thought, and my thought was, wow, you really have nothing. You have nothing. You don't have prospects or character or self-respect. You don't have anything of your material possessions. My guitars were gone. And then I thought, I got 30 days, and I'd never had 30 days. And it really was like crystal clear that if I had to write on a piece of paper, what belongs to you that you don't owe anyone? The only thing I could write was 30 days. And I turned around and I ran away from a party in my own apartment, and that's grace. That's not me, man. I never walked into a room and saw girls in thong bikinis snorting cocaine off a glass table and thought, I think I should go to a meeting. I never thought that. I usually go, hey guys, let's close the door. Is there anybody we can call? You know, it just wasn't like that for me. I think something intervened on me. I believe that. I remember it very clearly. It was 32 years ago, and I remember it very clearly. And I ran, and I ran to a payphone, and I called AA. And I was so embarrassed. I had 2 degrees, and I couldn't find AA in the phone book because I thought it was in the back of the book under all this embarrassing stuff you never want to have to call. I really did. I'm looking at the Z's, and then finally I'm like, oh, you know, it's right next to the automobile club. And I found AA, and I called AA, and the guy answered the phone. I didn't know he's some volunteer guy. And I just threw up all my problems on him. I was like, I used to be a real good musician. My mom's got cancer. I had a baby 30 days ago. I got a rehab. And the guy goes, okay, where are you? And I looked out the window of this, this glass booth, and I said, I'm on the corner of Burl and Redondo Beach Boulevard. And he said, wow, that's really weird. And I said, why is that weird? And he said, because there's a meeting right across the street. Grace. And I actually said, so what do you think I should do? Because that's awesome, but I have problems. I explained that to you, And the poor guy, he probably had like a year, and he finally got to answer the phones. And he goes, I think you should go to that meeting. And I did. And I don't remember anything. I remember wah, like a lot of you guys are hearing right now. And I remember looking around, people were laughing, and I just felt like my skin was on fire. I felt so self-conscious. I felt like everyone was staring at me. I didn't like it. But I was safe there. And I got up to leave, and I didn't know where I was going to go. And, one of the things I know about this grace and spirituality in general, as opposed to material world, is for everything that's happened, like us standing here, the things we said, the things Rob said, all the interactions outside, 10,000 things happen today for each and every one of those things to happen. There's a constant flow of support from the universe, honestly. And this is one of those moments. I walk by this guy as I don't know where to go, and he walks by and goes, hey, you're Neil's little brother. And I said, yeah. And he goes, I heard you look like crap. That love you get from AA, And I said, well, that was 30 days ago. And he goes, oh, can I give you a ride home? And remember the 10,000 things, right? And I go, okay. I ran to my first AA meeting. And he took me out to his car, and I wouldn't tell him where I lived. I'm embarrassed. I can't go there. And he goes, hey, what's going on? And I told him about the party. And he goes, can I take you to your parents' house? And I'm like, no. And the reason I couldn't go to my parents' house is because they're lovely people. They've been married at that time for 45 years to each other. They're very kind. I'm a loser. I'm fresh out of rehab with an illegitimate child. I'm not darkening their door with more problems in their worst time of their life. It would be embarrassing for them. It would be humiliating for me. And the guy drove me to my parents' house because of the 10,000 things. My brother's AA group painted my parents' house when my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And he knew where they lived. I can't make that happen. I did not want to go there. If you don't, Torrance, California, where I'm from, is just like a bunch of parents' house. There's like nothing there. There's a mall and parents' house. And I get out of the car and he drives off and I don't want to go up there. Because in my mind, this is bad. This is suffering. This isn't going to be good. This is going to be awkward and uncomfortable. And I walk up to the porch and I rang the doorbell. And my mother and father were from the Midwest. They're from Chicago. And people from the Midwest answered the door together. And my mother's strapped to a giant tank of oxygen. This is the 90s. They didn't have those little compartments. Just this big tank. And they're coming to the door together. And I'm standing on the porch. And I want to run. I got 30 days and I'm coming out of my skin. I look down and there's a guitar pick with my signature on it. On the porch. And I haven't been there for 7 months. And I don't know how that's still there. My mother is a fastidious housekeeper. My father was in the military. This is not their way. And it kept me on the porch. Grace, grace, it's all around us. And they opened the door. And they were glad to see me. Like, really glad. I didn't know. I've raised 4 children sober. Phoebe and I had 2 more children, and then my wife made me adopt another one against my will. And I didn't know that the favorite sentence of every parent is, I need your help. They were married to each other for 45 years. They were madly in love. And they were laying awake at night praying that their boy was going to be okay. And I arrived. So the point of me telling you this is looking through my prism of resentment and fear and anger and shame. I can't see perfect reality that's right in front of me. I didn't have any steps. I just thought this is going to be awful. And it was perfect. And I want to say something that you learned here if you're paying attention. Perfect can be very uncomfortable. Just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean it isn't perfect. I moved in with my parents that night. My mother was dying. I helped my father with her. I cleaned my mother. I held my father while he cried. It was really uncomfortable. But I would love to do it again. It was perfect. I didn't know. I walked back to my old bedroom. There's a life-size poster of Eric Clapton hanging there. It's all that was left of my childhood. I told him, I'm back, and I think some of you new guys will understand this. I talked to Eric a lot in my first year of sobriety because I can't talk to my parents, and everybody knows Eric Clapton knows everything. And so I saw him at a meeting once, and I thought, God, I always wanted your life. Apparently I have it, But I'm in this bedroom. I wake up the next day, and I can't believe I'm in my parents' house. I just got out of rehab. I thought I'd be sitting on the beach for a couple days. I can't go to my apartment. I have nothing but my clothes. I ran down the hall and said, Dad, I got this meeting directory. There's a meeting at 7 a.m. Can I borrow the car? And he said, if you're going to AA, just take the car. Because he saw my brother come out of living on the streets. So I took the car to get away from the uncomfortable place, right? And then I didn't realize how bad you guys were. It was like way worse than my parents' house. I come in, everybody's like loving and hugging, and the coffee's terrible. I mean, not as bad as your coffee. We don't serve instant coffee, but it was weird, and I didn't feel part of. So I just sit in the back of the room. After an hour, I go, okay, where am I going to go? So I just drive back to my parents' house. And they got, why they were so uncomfortable? They were like kind and loving and honest. I just didn't hang out with this type of people for a really long time. And they never brought up my past. I asked my dad when I was living there about a month, I said, Dad, why have you not brought up the stuff that I did? Because it was all coming out now. And he said, because your clock started when you knocked on our door. And I said, Dad, why was there a guitar pick on the floor of the porch? He goes, you dropped it the last time you were here. And your mother and I missed you. So we never picked it up. I didn't know. There was all this spiritual love around me. And I was sitting like Gollum in my apartment, my precious, watching a blank television set, drinking gin. And this was all waiting for me. But I went to 3 meetings a day because I could not handle them. They were beautiful, but they just made me nervous because of who I was, not because of who they were. And I want to talk about the second step, right? The second step says, came to believe. It doesn't say, our sponsor read, we agnostics at us till we went, okay, I believe. It really is a process, and it's a natural process if you come here. And what happened to me, and I'm just being honest, what happened to me was, I remember this day, I don't know if I was 60 days sober or what, but I remember this day, 90 days maybe, and I woke up to go to the early meeting, and I smelled Dad trying to make breakfast. And my dad should not make breakfast. That's not his forte. He's not allowed in there. My mom made breakfast. And I knew it wasn't going to be good, so I ran down the hall, and I helped him. And I was right. There were bacon was in the wrong pan, the eggs were on the counter. And while I'm trying to make this work out, he's looking at the side of my face, and he starts telling me how much he loves my mom. Like really talking about intimacy of a long marriage. And I'm listening to him, and I'm helping him make the eggs, and I go, God, this man is so beautiful. And he's been right in front of me all this time. I got relieved of the bondage of self enough to see perfect reality. And then I looked at my watch. It was 6:45. I'm like, Dad, I got to go to the 7 a.m. meeting. Now, the reason I had to go to the 7 a.m. meeting is I've been going every day. And Carol went to that meeting, and she talked inappropriately about her sex life whenever they called on her. And I like that, So, I'm just telling you the truth. It's attraction rather than promotion. And, Carol was awesome. She'd be like, I don't know, I went to an orgy. Should I write thank you notes? I loved Carol. She was free, I don't think she was. But I had to go. And I went down to the meeting, and I'm looking around, and there's this woman, Karen, and Karen loved this man, Bill. And the way they talked to each other, and the way he shared used to make me laugh. I thought, God, I really like that guy. Then I started laughing. Then I hung out a while, and I came to believe. That's what happened to me here. If you're new here and you think you're not getting it, just come here and it will happen. The only way you will cheat yourself of it is if you don't come here. And a lot of you will stop coming here. And my heart breaks for you. So I went to meetings. I got this crappy job at night, stacking newspapers, like in the evening, not at night. Went to meetings, started working the steps. Things got better. I got this job at this airline through a fluke. I'm going to talk about it tomorrow when I talk about the third step, how that happened. I got to the airline. I'd never had a good job like that sober. And I had been, my resume was not good. I'd gone to a party for 12 years. I played guitar in a band. I'm like, so what are your applicable skills? But I love my job. I love my job. And I bought a guitar one day on my way to work. It's beautiful Taylor single cutaway Dan Query model acoustic guitar. If you play guitar, you're jealous of me now. And I'm okay with that. I have self-esteem. I've worked the steps. But I got in there, and nobody trusted me at work because I got hired by the vice president. I worked for Qantas, actually. And I got hired by the vice president because of something I'd done for him. And nobody trusted me because they thought I was a mole. I didn't go out at night with the girls, and I didn't drink. I didn't chase women. I didn't drink. So they thought, don't trust that guy. And I got this beautiful guitar. I'd open up my locker at every break and pet it. I love guitars. And if you've ever had a Taylor, they have the sexiest cases, man, really sexy. And so I walk out to the employee bus stop that night at LAX, and at 10:30 at night, everyone's waiting for the bus, and I'm standing there with this guitar, and I realize my parents aren't going to want to see this guitar either, right? They think somehow my alcoholism had to do with my guitar playing, which cracks me up. Right? Both my uncles died of alcoholism. My brothers both have it. My grandfather died of alcoholism after Bill Wilson 12-stepped him. But Mick Jagger is responsible for my alcoholism for some reason. My parents have this weird concept. I think because I was such a good kid till I disappeared. You know? So I'm standing there realizing I'm going to go home. I'm so lonely all of a sudden with this guitar, which I was so excited about. So I turned to this woman from British Airways who's standing there. I said, hey, can I show you this guitar I just bought? And she looked at me and she goes, I don't look at strange men's guitars. And I'm like, lady, I'm not hitting on you. You know, I wanted to say, like, I live with my parents. I'm in AA. I have a baby. Would you like to go out? You know, like, I'm not the chick magnet that I appear with my guitar, right? And she just walked on the bus, and I got on the bus, and much to her chagrin, we were squished against each other. Like, she's right here, right? And I got this guitar, and she's trying to act like she can't see me, right? And I looked down, and in her hand is a book called Surprised by Joy by C.S. Lewis, and I've read that book. It's a beautiful book about Christianity, and it's one of my degrees is comparative religion, not divinity. And I looked down at that book, and I could tell she was nervous, and I said, hey, I've read that book. And she goes, cut to the chase, do you believe in God? And I almost spit. I went, God saved my life! You know, like, blah! You know. And she just went, oh, crap. You know, like, she wanted to get off the bus so fast, and it was a long ride, and she goes, I don't believe in God. And I go, oh, whoa, you know, sorry. And I said, well, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And we had this really nice chat on the ride to the employee bus stop. And she was lovely. And I have to say, I did realize, talking to her then, that she was very beautiful. I only picked her because I wanted someone to look at my guitar. But while I was standing with her, there was a space, a comfort, kind of this relief of being in her presence. I don't know how to describe it. And we got off the bus, and I started to walk away, and I said, don't blow this. And I turned around, and I said, hey, would you like to have dinner sometime? And boy, did she not want to have dinner with me. She was like, oh, right, look at my guitar. I read that book. Like, blah, like really? And I go, hey, no is a complete answer. And that kind of took her off guard. She goes, oh, no. And I'm not this bold with women, but I said, I think we're missing something. And she went her way, and I went mine. I got home to my dad, and my dad used to wait up for me and talk to me about my mom. He was so afraid to be alone. He was so in love with her. And I saw that look on his face, and I walked up to him and said, Dad, I met this girl, and she felt like home. And he said, really? Wow. Tell me about that. And he was so interested. I used to think, God, my dad was so kind that night. Now I think maybe he wanted me to move out. I think maybe there was an ulterior motive. But he was really like, tell me all about it. And I told him the story I just told you. And we walked down the hall, and he was turning into Mom's room, and I got this guitar that I haven't shown anybody, you know. And he put his hands between my shoulder blades, and he said, son, that's not over. I said, Dad, it's over. But see, my dad believed in grace. He had his whole life. But I believed in the material world, where this girl shut me down harder than anyone has ever shut me down. And I said, Dad, thanks and everything, but it's over. And I went to work the next day, and thought about her all day. I could see her, and I didn't want to see her at the bus stop, so I ran to the early bus, and she came up behind me, and she said, hey, I think I was rude to you. I said, that's okay. She said, I'm not going to go out with you. I said, yeah, you've been very clear about that. You know, I don't think we really need to go over that. And she said, no, but what I'm saying is, if you want to miss this bus and have coffee with me, I'll have coffee with you. And I really wanted to feel that again, that space. And I said, I would love to do that. And 2 weeks later, she proposed to me. And we've been married for 30 years. Bam! That's right. That's grace. I didn't propose to her. I'm not risking another question on this woman. But we've been married, like, really happily married. Really. I mean, you don't adopt a fourth child unless you got some kind of mojo going on at home. And the way that happened was, it's such a bummer, actually. I had these 3 kids, and I should tell you, and I'll talk about it more this weekend, my wife had a massive stroke when we were married for 7 years, and I've been technically her caregiver for 23 years. She's paralyzed on her left side. She's brain damaged. But what that really means is I help her get dressed and undressed, and I try to do everything that takes a memory and 2 hands and 2 legs. She gives all the care in the house. I'm just lucky enough to take care of her physically. And when our youngest was 12, Sophie, and Rory was 16, and Phoebe was on college, she said, hey, Sophie's best friend, we'd moved to Washington. She goes, we need to adopt her. And I'm like, what? I go, doesn't she have a family? I mean, she has clothes on every time I see her, like they're different clothes. And she goes, no, it's not a family like you think about. And I go, okay, but we can adopt her. I go, we got these 3 kids. No one's addicted to crack. No one's a hooker yet. We're doing really well. I don't want to mess with this. I got one income, and I'm supporting these people, and my kids are good kids. And she's a wild card. I don't want to invite that into this. And my son worked on me about it. Sophie worked on me about it. And then what happened was, one night, I'd gotten Pip into bed and ready for bed, and a sponsee called. And I sat on the edge of the bed, and I talked to the sponsee for about half an hour. And I hung up the phone, and she said, wow, I figured out who you are. And I go, after all these years, you figured out who I am. She goes, you're a guy who likes to talk about his principles. I know, right? She took this big, knitting needle and stuck it in my spiritual balloon, and I laid awake that night thinking, I'm going to have a 4th kid. And I went to court 3 times, and Abby came with me, and my wife came with me, and her family didn't even show up. So I told you all of that stuff, and some of you who are new might be saying, he's talking about the steps, and they wandered off. I did not wander off. I've been married for a long time. I couldn't stay with a woman for a year. I've fathered children and stayed close to them. Phoebe and I are very close. In fact, I went to Betty Ford the day Phoebe was born. I got taken to the Betty Ford clinic. My daughter Phoebe grew up to be this fine, strong woman, a very smart woman. She worked 2 jobs and went to nursing school and became a psych nurse, and she just got hired at Betty Ford. But I'll finish with this, because I got a couple other talks to do this weekend where I can talk about some of the stuff I meant to say right now. But you don't often get to see the bookends of what happens here in AA. In fact, Rob talked about it, the marriage and the beauty of not saying the right thing and then being present and being the right person. It was so beautiful the way he did that. Well, Phoebe, a couple of years ago in March, she called and said, hey, I need Pip and you to come up to Portland. That's where she lives. They have Betty Ford Hazelton in Portland. But she was working somewhere else then. And she said, I need you to come up next week. And I said, okay. And she goes, it'd be good if you got here Tuesday. And I said, all right. And she goes, I want you to stay in the Marriott downtown. And I said, okay. And I did. I did all those things. And then she called on Tuesday and said, it's not today. I'm going to call you tomorrow. And then it wasn't Wednesday. And then Thursday she called and she said, it's time, Dad. And I put Pip in my car. And I went to the right hospital. And I ran up the stairs. And Phoebe handed me Emmett, our grandchild. And I was looking at Phoebe, and we were crying together. And Anna was there, and she was smiling at me with her husband. And I could see the grace. I could see the beauty. It wasn't anything to do with me. I didn't feel ugly and disgusting. I didn't want to kill myself. I wanted to stay in that moment for as long as I possibly could. And the only reason I was able to show up for that is because I practiced these 12 spiritual exercises that give me temporary relief from the bondage of self. And it's the best gift I've ever gotten. Thank you for having me at your conference.
I don't think I can speak. It was absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much, Matthew. That brings us to the end of the meeting. I'd just like to ask everybody, please, to be upstanding and hold hands if you wish. To a God of your understanding, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen.